Okay, should we get started? Bismillah. Bismillah walhamdulillah. Wassalatu wassalam ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa barak wa sallam. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Is anyone else cold?
Yes.
It's really cold, right?
Yes.
Also, there's like a very disproportionate gender ratio in this room right now. Huh? What is going on? Do you guys want to move over this way so that people come in and pray? It does, that'll be good. No?
No, I'm not good. Do you want me to take one of those down?
Yeah, if you want to. If people are comfortable with that.
Okay. Does anyone have
You were the front last.
I was. It's okay. I know. You were not in the front too, girl?
No.
We moved one person. That was not. Oh, I see. That's true.
Great. So last week we ended where the Prophet ﷺ had started to speak to 6 people from Yathrib as he was meeting people now after Al-Isra wal Mi'raj. Do people remember what we were talking about? Yeah? Is that where we stopped? Kind of? Yeah. I don't know what's going on. Yeah. Maybe. So let's just pretend that's where we stopped. And we wanted to pick up from there, but to kind of contextualize some of what was happening, the Prophet comes down from Al-Isra wal Mi'raj. We spent a lot of time talking about. And he has essentially kind of, cut ties with the people of Mecca. He doesn't have protection. He's got to figure out a place where they can go. There's an elder man who is still there that's offering him some form of protection, Mut'im ibn Adi, but he needs to be able to ally himself now with another clan, another tribe, so that he and his people can essentially have a place where they're able to grow and establish Islam. So people were still coming in for Hajj, and as the tribes are coming in, we said last time, they're kind of designated by their kind of tribal lineage. And so it's very easy to find people from certain clans and groupings and engage them in a way that enables conversation, and people keep rejecting them, right? And then he meets these 6 people who are from the Khazraj tribe, one of the tribes of Medina, and they're not like known in the ways some of these other tribes that we talked about last time were known in terms of their power or their numbers or their clout. So there's some people who showed up and they had like triple digits or like 4 digits of people with them. And then there were some people who showed up who they were like, you could count them on like your fingers, But through this group of 6, is where Medina gets established and Islam flourishes. Not the people who are coming with a certain notoriety and prestige, but from the people that it was unexpected from. Does that make sense? I think this is kind of where we stopped last time, right? Yeah. Yeah, great. Thanks. Thank you. Yeah. So to give you a little bit more of an insight, these 2 tribes in Medina, they're the Aus and Khazraj. They essentially have an ongoing kind of feud. There's civil war that takes place within Medina, not to go into it in too much detail, but it's important to understand because we're getting to a place now where this meeting with these group of 6 individuals, this happens in the 10th year of prophethood. The 11th year we're going to talk about is when the first instance of an oath, the first pledge of Al-Aqaba takes place with 12 people. In the 12th year is where there's going to be about 70, 75 people coming from Medina who are all Muslim, and the second pledge of Al-Aqaba takes place. And then in that 13th year, in the beginning of it, is when the actual migration takes place from Mecca to Medina. In Medina, one of the things that we said, aside from these two Arab tribes, the Aus and Khazraj, there were different clans of Jewish tribes, right? The Banu Qurayda, the Banu Qaynuqa, and the Banu Nadir. And what it laid was a foundation for an understanding of monotheism, but also the feud that turned into a battle between the Aus and Khazraj had a lot of people pass away that an elder generation experientially was fighting over things relevant to their own kind of traditional form of religion, and younger people becoming a little bit more disenchanted because they saw the loss that came from war, right? And the added influence of a monotheistic tradition like Judaism there gives them a different sense of interaction with what the prophet is telling them now, in terms of, hey, there's one God and I'm the messenger of God, a last messenger that's sent. Does this make sense so far? Because you want to be able to think out, well, how is it that the people of Medina receive this? And in the 13th year, when Hijrah is taking place, they are willing to actually, in those 2.5 years prior, get from a place where 6 people go back. They come back with 12 who are all Muslim at this point. And then the next year they come back with 75, and everybody didn't go for Hajj, right? It's not like everybody goes to perform pilgrimage the same way in our community. Are any of you going for Hajj this year? Huh? Your parents are going? You are going? MashaAllah, Allah accept. We're going to do some Hajj prep work and stuff. But you see, like in a room that has a decent number of people, right? Either through a degree of separation or one person out of many is going. That's how it was also back in the day. It wasn't that everybody just got up and left, but you would have like segments of a community go. So if there's 12 people coming or 75 people coming in years 11 and years 12 respectively, that means they probably left behind a good number of people, right? And the things you want to extrapolate are not just the memorization of names and dates, but to understand how did that foundation get set, and the way things are being reared and prepped in Mecca, so too, like things are being made ready in Medina, right? And there's difficulty that then creates a foundation that brings now more of a reception towards this idea of monotheism. We don't sometimes understand it when we're immersed in hardship or we see someone in hardship, how that becomes like a necessary variable for something good to come from it. Do you get what I mean? Like the Prophet Yusuf alayhi salam, the Prophet Joseph, peace be upon him, his father Yaqub alayhi salam was also a prophet of God, who was distressed at his sons throwing his son into a well, right? He might not know the particulars, but he knew that the brothers did something to Yusuf alayhi salam. And he cries so intensely, like it impacts his eyesight. That's how much he's crying. His tears are necessary for the Prophet Yusuf to end up where he ends up and revitalize an entire economy of Egypt. Do you get what I mean? That can't happen without those tears being shed. Does that make sense? It doesn't mean it's any less hard on the dad being separated from the son, do you know? But one is necessary for the next to take place. In retrospect, some of it might make sense. And it doesn't mean that he didn't miss his son any less, do you know? But it sometimes is hard when you're immersed in it to kind of see the broader picture. And we want to be able to see how the moving parts get people ready for Medina to then be something where this gets established. It's not just happening kind of one night it was X and then the next night it was Y, but it was a process that took place over time. So when they're meeting with these 6 people from the Khazraj tribe, the Aus and the Khazraj have already had a difficult interaction. There's not an indication that the 6 people that the prophet speaks to in that 10th year of revelation at the Hajj season time are suddenly all Muslim right then and there. Do you know? But they have an openness to kind of reflect and ponder on that message. And then they go back to Medina and they tell other people about it also. When they come back in the next calendar year, which is the 11th year, the Prophet's doing the same thing, that the people are coming for Hajj. Rather than him going to their communities, he knows they're going to be coming to his space. So he starts to engage them, similar messaging. There's now 12 people that have come from Yathrib, but they're saying we're all Muslim. And amongst them are now people who identify from the Khazraj tribe and people who identify from the tribe of Al-Aus. And these were people who were feuding and killing each other, and they showed up together, and they don't do anything together. You see what I mean? And what brings them together is their belief in Islam. Traditionally, they were in a place where they, for every reason whatsoever, were at odds with each other. But you start to see the foundation now of where unification in the truest sense of the word starts to kind of manifest. These guys that did not get along, they now started to get along. A year passes. What must be happening on the ground in Yathrib? These 6 people who came, they're talking to other people about what it was that they heard and what it was that they learned and what it was that they took. And they're spreading it without condition or qualification. You see? It wasn't that their religious experience was limited now to a shared experience as a clan. And it's important to understand because they became Muslim outside of Mecca. Where have we met anybody thus far that has had that many people become Muslim without the Prophet being in that locale, right? So if you illustrate it in your head, it wasn't that the Prophet came to Yathrib and they were kind of enthralled by his presence, or they knew him as Al-Amin, the trustworthy one, or his oration or communication, but they took his teachings, and independent of his being there, this large group of people became Muslim. And that's happening through people who bought into a message and then shared a message. And it's a key moment in the prophetic biography, because we're not hearing necessarily that in Abyssinia, there's like large conversion movements. They just went there to thrive and survive. Do you know? And here's a population that is now miles away from the center of all of it. And they're getting independently people to start to follow Islam. Does that make sense? And when they're doing that, they're not keeping it just amongst themselves, but they're going to the tribe that they were also historically at odds with. Do you know? And that takes a different kind of courage and a different kind of bravery. As we analyze trends and themes, we talked about like water and its presence in the Seerah. We talked about gender. We talk about race. We talk about knowledge, contentment, learning, strife, difficulty. You can't read the prophetic biography and not just see how it was common characteristic amongst the companions who became Muslim early on, the first converts, as well as the Prophet himself, that like bravery is a constant theme that we see as a foundational ethos in just the way that they engage things. Does that make sense? Like they're willing to courageously put themselves out there and go and be with others rather than waiting for someone to come to them. It takes a lot of courage and bravery to leave everything familiar in Mecca and go to Abyssinia, and then come back from Abyssinia and go back to Abyssinia again. It takes a lot of bravery to like get up and read Quran out loud for the first time, right? As we said, the Prophet's companions were publicly like disseminating in the first years of revelation. It takes a lot of bravery to get to a place where you tell people that you went to Jerusalem and into the heavens and back all into a night, and not be worried what people will think about you. It takes a lot of bravery to be 6 people from a tribe that doesn't get along with another tribe, and then love what you have embraced as a truth so much that you're willing to share it with anybody, and not just people that you share externals with, right? All of it is rooted in bravery, courage. It's not the absence of fear that courage gets exerted in. You're not courageous because you are somebody who sits on a throne in your own kingdom and everybody just hears you. Courage is what happens in the presence of fear, not the absence of fear. Do you see? And they can still have tawheed, they can still have iman, they can still be people of belief. May Allah make us like them. And they can still be afraid of what tomorrow might be because they don't know. Year 13 is where they go in the beginning to establish Medina with a migration fully. But it's not until like 7 years into Medina that they get everybody from Abyssinia and say, you can now come, because they don't know if the Medina thing is going to work. And they still need some type of plan or strategy. The embrace of what is unknown is going to be something that is easier to take on, not because the uncertainty of what's unfamiliar is the drive, but they have a concrete familiarity rooted in iman that is in knowing who their God is. And that familiarity then trumps any unfamiliarity and becomes a basis of a courage that doesn't exist in the absence of fear, but exists in relation to fear being present. And the ethic is built upon foundationally the iman. The iman is not built on the ethic. Do you see what I mean? Does that make sense? I want you to think, right? Not in a way that is like demeaning or condescending, because arrogance passed from any heart to any heart is still arrogance. May Allah protect us from it. So just objectively think about like the people that you interact with, who only interact with people that are just like them. The same race, the same culture, the same language, the same food, the same dress. A lot of those people are scared. They need everybody to be just like them around them, not necessarily because they have a problem with somebody at face value who is different from them. But if you're not like me and everyone around me is not like me, I don't know how to be me around somebody who's different from me. And that insecurity is a variation of fear. And that fear creates a discomfort that then doesn't let me be courageous enough, because the ethic is not what I'm building it upon. My sense of self and identity is purely outward in rather than inward out, or even not even outward in, it's just purely outward. And they were with the Prophet of God, experienced his conviction, and then were willing to do something that nobody else was trying to do in the relationship between Al-Aws and Al-Khazraj. How do you have just limited numbers of people? And you would think the first people you would go to are all of the people that like hang out in your house and all of the people that are like in your clan and your tribe. But they came back with 12, and 2 of them were from the other tribe. 1 out of 5, right? 1 out of 6, right? A 5-to-1 ratio. That means somebody there was willing to live bigger than themselves and take on like the fear that says, we're not supposed to actually get along together. And then they came back as a diverse group. Everybody else on these Hajj trips, right, at that time were categorized how? by the tribes that they came with, right? These 12 came with a mixed group of people. Do you see? When we go for Hajj these days, when you all go for Hajj, you're going to go. Are you getting a Hajj package from America? Yeah, great. Because if you weren't, it wouldn't work. I was about to say. So you're going to be intense with other people that came from America. People from other countries are going to be intense from people that got visas from those countries. So they're going to be with people that are very culturally homogenous, and likely people who also come from a certain level of affluence that they can afford the Hajj package from the countries that they're coming from based off of the currency that they have, especially as the world is going haywire because the global economy is pegged to our dollar. And we don't really care what happens to other people in their countries when we're messing around with just trying to fill our own pockets, right? May Allah make it easy for people. A lot of those people are going to go back to the countries they came from where they're all racially, ethnically, culturally the same. The American tents are going to be made up of people that are very different from one another outwardly. And at the very base of it, this is what's happening in now this 11th year. The group that's coming that's Muslim is not made up of people that have one lineage or one culture, but right from the beginning, they are coming from diverse backgrounds. Do you understand? And that is something that is going to now be a big part of the rest of this thing going forward. There was already diversity that was taking place in the early groupings of companions. Everybody was not Abu Bakr or Umar or Uthman, but you had people like Abdullah ibn Mas'ud radiallahu anh. He's the first one to read Quran out loud. You remember like a year ago, we're talking about him. He's reading Surah Rahman in front of the Kaaba and people are beating him. He's physically small. His students describe him by his hair being braided and that his skin is black. He's one of the first companions. He reads Quran. His influence on the people of Kufa has deep impact on the Hanafi school of thought. And most of us don't know that the foundations of it were based off of a black Sahaba. That diversity was there amongst a persecuted population. When things go to hell, you can't choose who your friends are always, right? You just got to lean on whoever's there. In Medina, they're not being persecuted, right? They don't all have to get along because it's just them versus the world. And they still came back with a diverse group of people. Do you see? They could have, in a moment of ease, just said, this is the Bengali mosque. This is the Sudanese mosque. This is the Turkish mosque. And that's just what it is. We got our stuff. We don't have to think about anybody else because nobody's forcing us to come together in a moment of conflict or crisis. Even when they're in a place of ease, they still came back with people that nobody thought they would be getting along with. Do you see? And it's a big part of what our religious tradition is built upon. Tawheed is total unity, oneness. How will it tolerate divisiveness in its implementation? It's got to be a unifier, not a divisive tool and mechanism. Do you see? Let's do this because Maghrib's going to come in 2 minutes. What are you taking away so far? Let's talk to the persons next to us. If you don't know names, exchange some names. But let's talk about what's coming up for people. And then we'll take a pause for Maghrib and come back and continue. But go ahead. Were you here this whole time? Did you step out and come in? You did, right? I just want to make sure I'm not like losing my mind. Yeah, nice. She's gonna do it. Good. Inshallah. It's exciting, man. Let me.
Some people drop out.
Yeah.
So
Well, they're gonna still affiliate it with like a space. So you just keep that in mind, unless you like deliberately tell them that it's not. Do you know what I mean? Because then the guideline, like I'll talk to you about it after this is turned out good. But we had some of these issues with other groups that started, and then it came back to me, and they were like, people are doing this and this, and I was like, that's not part of us. But they're like, but it is. I'm like, no, but let's talk about it. Yeah, do what you gotta do. Okay, let's take a pause for Maghrib, and then we'll come back after Maghrib. But people want to just get situated to pray, and then we'll resume after Maghrib, inshallah. Can you guys call the adhan for Maghrib?
Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمد رسول الله أشهد أن محمد رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح قد قامت الصلاة قد قامت الصلاة الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله الله أكبر الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين ألم تر كيف فعل ربك بأصحاب الفيل ألم يجعل كيدهم في تضليل وأرسل عليهم طيرا أبابيل ترميهم بحجارة من سجيل فجعلهم كعصف مأكول الله أكبر سمع الله لمن حمده الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. قل أعوذ برب الناس ملك الناس إله الناس من شر الوسواس الخناس الذي يوسوس في صدور الناس من الجنة والناس. الله أكبر. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. Assalamu alaikum warahmatullah. We're going to be continuing our Wednesday night Seerah halakha. Once people are done praying Sunnah, so feel free to stick around. We'll probably go to a little bit before Isha time.
Yeah.
I would just say you start that with without technology. That's a year we can touch base, and then I'll just give you some background on some other stuff. Yeah, it's something that happened before. It's not even personal. Okay, but then next time you get one. All right, man. Sorry, go see.
How's
How are you?
how's it going?
How's everything? Did you see my
Good.
invitation
To what?
for the dinner?
Yeah.
Okay. You're excited.
Did I
We
tell
were
you
just
Priya
talking about
said she wanted to come?
You
I
said what?
told you, right? Priya said she's good for that date.
Yeah, you did.
Yeah, nice. They're away right now, but when they come back, Medina and Kareem had off this week.
Yeah.
So when they come back, I'll just remind her.
Okay.
Yeah, so.
Well, did you see my text too about the scholarship letter recommendation?
The continuous charity one? No. What did happen?
Did you submit the letter recommendation?
I think I did.
Okay.
Um,
I just want to confirm because
But-
I want to send them an email asking if my application was complete.
okay. Let me double check and see.
Okay. So
But I usually like save when I submit things, I get like responses to them.
yeah.
I send a lot of recommendation letters.
Yeah.
So
it
let me
was through the
double check.
email. They were like their.
I know you said to email it to their email
Yeah.
account, right?
Mhm.
Yeah. But
Just let me know, inshallah.
when I get home, I'll double check.
Okay. Thank
Yeah. No
you.
problem.
Daddy, he needs the charger.
Okay, should we get started? Yeah. Yes. Are you nodding your head? Yes. Okay. Bismillah, Bismillah, walhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalam ala rasulillah, wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa barak wa sallam. Okay. So maybe we could hear from a few people before we took a pause for Maghrib. Like, what were people talking about? What was coming up for people? Because we're kind of discussing the uniqueness of this, right? They come back now, year 11, and they're coming back kind of together as a group. Al-Aws wal-Khazraj. What do we discuss? Or what's coming up for people so far?
Someone in our group asked if it counts as bad when you're hanging out with Muslims.
If you only hang out with Muslims, why? What does it mean to count as bad?
You're saying everyone always hangs out with the same people that are the same as them. The Muslims qualify as the same as them.
Well, I mean, I don't know if it works that way, right? Because it would depend on why you're doing what you're doing, and people are so different from each other. Do you know what I mean? So it's hard to just definitively say everything black and white. So like, it's bad to eat pork because the Quran says don't eat pork, and there's a basis to say, well, why would that be something that would be like reprehensible? Because Allah very clearly establishes that. But there's not anything that's gonna like create for us, like, there's a lot of benefits to being in spaces where everybody's like you and understands you and gets you. There could be 100 different reasons as to why somebody may or may not engage only. But if you say like it's better, it's a problematic statement. Like, in the room, we have people who are converts to Islam, for example, right? Are we saying that it's better for them to not interact with their family members? Do you know? If we say like these kind of sweeping statements, then people have to make sense of in their heads that come across as absolutes in religion when they're not absolutes. Do you know what I mean? Does that make sense? Yeah. But like, if you are only interacting with people you share faith with, it's not a good or bad. You just have to think out like why that might be the case. Do you know? Is that a conscious decision? Is it an unconscious decision? Do you see what I mean? Does that make sense? But what did we talk about? What were you guys discussing in relation to? Can we kind of like move in, just because people are going to keep coming in to pray Maghrib, and we want to be able to give them space to pray. Like, so what do we think about this? Any things that come up for people? Do we remember what we were talking about before we went to pray? Why does everybody look so sad? Yeah.
Courage emerged. Like in the early days of Islam, the Sahaba and had courage about this issue.
Great. Do people need some sugar? Like, should we get some sugar for people? You need some sugar?
No.
Yeah.
I was gonna say, so our group was talking about how interesting here in Manhattan is that this is the only space where I feel like it's like truly a diverse crowd, even though Manhattan's like, or just New York in general, like a melting pot of just all these different cultures and everything here, and even then, it's still fragmented. So the fact that it still remains fragmented here, that's further amplified in like suburbs or wherever else in the country. So what we're talking about is we have that here. How can you recreate that in other places? Especially when, let's say, like just pockets of people go to like an area because they know that the same people are there.
Mhm.
How do you kind of disrupt that?
How do you disrupt it? Tina, something?
Yeah, there's a NYU Med pre-med panel. They wanted to make an announcement because
It's supposed to be in here.
in 475,
Oh,
if
okay.
people are pre-med are interested in coming to the panel.
If anyone's pre-med and wants to go to the pre-med panel, if you all are
475.
475. Is there food over there?
Snacks.
Yeah, I think some people in this room need to eat something. Sorry, man. Yeah, go ahead.
No, that was it. That's the question. That's what I'm trying to figure out. It's like,
So-
how would you disrupt that?
Why don't you answer the question?
I can answer.
Oh, he's got an answer.
I don't have an answer, but what I can say is I don't think it's this fragmentation problem that's only exclusive to New York. I grew up in Kansas, and like even then, you'll have one masjid that's like not overwhelmingly, but has like a majority Pakistani or South Asian people, and the other masjid has like a majority Arab people. I think it is a natural tendency to self-segregate almost to like what's familiar with your culture and stuff like that. So how we solve that, I don't have the answer per se, but I think it's a natural tendency to go to what's familiar, even within your own same community, I suppose.
Yeah, but think about it in the prism of courage, right? And the sociological phenomenon is not a problem when you connect to people on shared externals. That's just kind of how we're built. But I'm saying like, it's different if I'm very consciously anxious to talk to you because you're different from me. Do you know? I don't know how to interact with you because like I don't know how to engage with somebody that is not exactly like me. Do you know? And that like where does that come from? Like think about in real time. Do you know what I mean? These 6 people went, had a conversation, and then with a degree of separation had conversations with other people. It's one thing to be able to be skilled enough to talk to someone who you share characteristics with. It's another thing to be able to communicate effectively with a degree of separation from the primary source to someone who you're different from. Do you know? And still get across at a level that like moves hearts. Do you see what I mean? And it's like, well, what makes that possible, right? Like what makes that happen? Do you know? And it's not going to come from just kind of staying within yourself, right? That there could be a certain ease that generates from that, but then you don't know fundamentally how to function within diverse populations. It creates then that much more of a challenge in a lot of different ways. We say like stratified societies, hierarchies on race and class, etc. But for us, it creates a problem because it doesn't then respond to Quranic understandings of like why God made us in the ways that he made us, right? Li ta'arafu, the verse says, right? It doesn't say la'allakum the way it says in fasting, right? Kutiba alaykumus siyam kama kutiba ala alladhina min qablikum la'allakum tattaqun. That do this thing, like it was written for you, fasting as it was for those that came before you. So potentially you might like gain taqwa, right? May Allah make us from the muttaqeen. When the li is there and not la'allakum, it's saying like this is what this yields, right? Ya ayyuhan nas inna khalaqnakum min dhakarin wa untha wa ja'alnakum shu'uban wa qaba'ila li ta'arafu, right? Like you were made into nations and tribes li ta'arafu, so that you would have like intimate experiential knowledge of one another. That's like what it's about. It's not saying like that potentially or perhaps, it's saying this is why you were made diverse so that you would have this intimate knowing of one another. Do you get what I mean? You can't know somebody intimately if you don't spend time with them, but you can know something of someone through perception without ever having spent time with them, right? Like you think certain things about populations that are different from you without ever having spent any time with them. That's like a thing that is very real and it's possible. Do you know? Why do you think things about homeless people that you do? And maybe not you as a specific, but as a generalization. Do you know? Have you ever talked to a homeless person before? Do you know what I mean? And people say all kinds of ridiculous things, right? When I had a restaurant down the street, we had a lot of people that interviewed for jobs who lived in shelter systems. They didn't have a home. And I had people who would be sitting in the restaurant and the guy's talking. If you guys remember my restaurant, it wasn't like a big space. So we could be sitting having a conversation and somebody's sitting right here, right next to us. And people would say things like, that guy couldn't have been living in a shelter or homeless. And I was like, well, why? He's like, well, he was wearing a tie to the interview. I was like, what does that mean? Right? Do you know what I'm saying? It's so, and it's like, well, he also had a cell phone, right? It's like, what are you talking about? Do you see what I mean? But they think they know, and what is it based off of? And yeah, and the verse is saying, li ta'arafu, right? So some of these people from Khazraj had to go and talk to some of the people from the Aus tribe, and that takes courage and a capacity through the courage to communicate effectively, right? You're not going to know how to engage with people other than the people you interact with. How would you know if you don't? That's why, like we tell people, follow prophetic counsel. The benefit is back to us more than anyone. The best of you are those who greet those you know and those that you don't know, right? Some of you do not greet people who are different from you because you're scared. You're scared to come across weird. You're scared to like have an awkward interaction because you've never talked to somebody who comes from a different place than your own. You're going to only have the courage to do the act by doing the act, and then it'll increase the courage. Do you see what I mean? If you just live in a bubble, then like there's a deprivation that happens. Does that make sense? Right? It doesn't mean you can't have like preferences or friends or whatever, right? But fundamentally, at the base, we're seeing Islam is becoming a unifier for people. And it didn't exist only in the circumstance of turmoil, but also in a place where there was ease. It was bringing together tribes that historically didn't get along with each other. And the Prophet has these 12 people with them. They take what is called the first pledge of allegiance at Al-Aqaba, right? The Bayat al-Aqaba. This concept of taking bayah is still like something that exists within Muslim communities globally. You have them in various tracks. Many spiritual traditions will have like this idea of taking an oath of allegiance to a spiritual teacher. There's political movements that will formulate like political oaths. Depending on the persons you ask, they will utilize language again. Like, is this better? Is this worse? Right? Islam is like a very broad experience for different people. And being able to understand the merits of something that you might not do yourself doesn't mean you have to negate the entire thing just because you choose to do it or not do it. The opposite doesn't mean that it's bad to be doing it differently. But there's things that still exist, like at a spiritual level, at a political level. There's not an established Muslim experience that has a mode of governance that you're taking an oath to in the world right now, right? Does that make sense? A caliphate gets abolished in the 1920s. That's when this thing like stops. But you still have like a deep history of people taking spiritual kind of oaths of allegiance to a teacher, political movements. Allah knows best. Here, this first oath that's taken is one that discusses not like political kind of elements, but is rooted more in morality and ethics. So there's a lot of different people who are present at that time. One whose hadith I'll read to you right now, his name is Ubadah ibn Aslamit. He says that the Prophet ﷺ said while a group of his companions were around him, swear allegiance to me for the following. 1, not to join anything in worship along with Allah. Right? It's very straightforward, right? No shirk. Not to steal, not to commit zina, not to kill like your children, not to accuse an innocent person or to spread such an accusation amongst people, and not to be disobedient when commanded to do a good deed. this first oath of allegiance is rooted in morals and ethics, right? He's taking 12 people and instructing them. They don't have at this point yet zakat, like Hajj as we understand it today, or like the fast of Ramadan. They do have Salah, because when did Salah come? It came on Al-Isra wal-Miraj. And they do have Shahada, right? La ilaha illallah, Muhammadur Rasulullah. That's there from day one. Do you know what I mean? So the Prophet isn't instilling within them a legalistic framework that's rooted only in ritual and practices of like pillars of Islam, but at the base of it, the same way when he is engaged, like we said, by the chieftains of these tribes. Last week we were talking about that they were in a place where they're asking, like, what is this thing about? And the Prophet is reading to them like verses of Quran that are speaking about like ihsan and how you treat people and ethics. And they're asking for more. And he says to them, the verse, in Allah ya'muru bil adl, right? Like he's giving this comprehensive verse. It's about ethics and morality. Do you see what I mean? So here, there's the particulars of like these 6 things, and these people are pledging an oath upon this. You can't take an oath on a vacuum. It's got to be on something, right? You're forming now a bond to commit to the upholding of this, and it's not by chance that they are taking this bond and oath on these things of ethics and morals. If somebody says, like, what makes you a good Muslim, it cannot be devoid of a conversation of character. It's got to be something that also incorporates good character and not based off of a moral relativism. I think, I want, I feel. It's an evidentiary-based tradition that is determining for us, like through practice, ritual, like guidelines on various components, they can still have room for flexibility. So the Quran and the Hadith doesn't say you can only wear this outfit, but it tells you here's guiding principles for clothing, and then it synergizes with prevailing cultures and norms. It tells you like here are ethics around like consumption, food, how you like slaughter. You slaughter with ihsan, the animal you're going to eat, right? But it doesn't tell you you can only eat this one particular type of food. It's just the application of it. And that's where you go all over the Muslim world and people are eating different stuff. Do you see what I mean? Right? It's very broad, but it creates like an ethical framework. Do you know? In Allah kataba al-ihsan ala kulli shay, the hadith says that Allah has prescribed ihsan on everything. Like there's some element of this that can be evoked in all of our decision making and choices. May Allah make us from the muhsineen. So here, these people who are now coming together also from Al-Aws and Al-Khazraj, they're also being deepened in their bond on shared internals, like values and ethics. Do you get what I mean? That's the base of what this is. Because the Prophet had these 5 daily prayers. In this allegiance, he's not saying you're committing to the performance of these daily prayers. He's saying these things. You commit to not associating partners with Allah. You don't steal. You're not committing zina. You don't kill your children. You don't accuse an innocent person. And you don't disobey when you're told to do like a good action. You see what I mean? Right? The other thing that happens is that they ask for somebody to be sent back with them to Medina. And so the Prophet, he sends a young companion by the name of Mus'ab ibn Umair to be with them in Medina. This is happening in year 11. They are 12. They leave with this oath as people who converted to Islam prior to, and they leave with Mus'ab ibn Umair. Mus'ab ibn Umair is a young companion who in Mecca is known as pretty much being like from amongst the most elite and well-known of like young men. He came from an affluent, rich family, wore like the best of clothes, the most like fragrant of scents. People wanted to like marry him because of his popularity and who he was as a person. Musab ibn Umair like starts out his life in this way with a lot of affluence and influence, a lot of materialistic possession. When he hears about who the Prophet of God is and he makes inquiry, he's amongst those early companions that embrace Islam. He gets chained up in his house by his mother when she finds out that he becomes Muslim. They are able to kind of separate from that instance. The Prophet sends him to be his emissary to Medina. He is like essentially the first messenger of the messenger of God. Do you know? And Musab ibn Umair has like a very gentle disposition. We'll talk about it in a bit, because there's a companion by the name of Usaid radiallahu an, Sa'ad ibn Mu'adh radiallahu an. They convert to Islam in Medina at the hands of Musab ibn Umair, and they're like the chieftains of their tribes. And because of them, their whole like clans become Muslim. Do you know? This man, Musab ibn Umair, like aside from being an emissary for the Prophet to Yathrib at the kind of early stages of the establishment of Islam there, and in the latter stage of the Meccan period, priming them for receiving Islam, he is amongst the companions who are martyred at the Battle of Uhud. And this is a battle that we lose. We don't win it. And Musab ibn Umair, he is the flag bearer. He holds the standard at Uhud. And essentially what happens, the Muslims are winning Uhud. We're going to talk about it in a lot more detail, like some months from now. But there's archers that are told to stay in their position and not leave no matter what. They're covering essentially the soldiers that are on the ground. And when you go, you can see like the mount of the archers. It's very like evident there. Some of us have been there together. And Ikramah, the son of Abu Jahl, and Khalid ibn Walid, neither of them are Muslim at this time. And they're essentially leading the flanks of the mushrikeen. And when they see the archers leave their position, because there's spoils of war on the battlefield, and they go to get that, and they don't follow the command, right? This is the first thing in the first oath at Al-Aqaba. Like, don't be disobedient when you're told to do something good. It doesn't just screw up things for you, it could screw up things for a lot of other people. When the tide is turned, like everyone's attention goes to protecting the Prophet. And a lot of senior companions are killed in this battle. Musab ibn Umair is holding a flag, and he's told not to let this flag drop. That's his job as the standard bearer. So he's got a sword and a flag, and he's fighting, and they sever one of his limbs off. So he puts the flag in the other hand, and then they sever that arm, and then he's holding the flag between the stumps of his arms. And they literally like mutilate his body, but he does whatever he can to ensure that the banner of Islam does not fall. At the end of the battle, the Prophet goes to see all those who have fallen in the battlefield. And with Musab ibn Umair, he's looking at his body, and the only thing he now has is a sheet that if you covered his face with the sheet, his feet would get exposed. And if you covered the feet with the sheet, his face would get exposed. And the Prophet remembers that he came into Islam and he had everything. And he's leaving now, and all he's got is this sheet that doesn't even cover his whole body. So they cover his face with the sheet, and on his feet, he puts some shrubbery. And the shaheed in our tradition, they get buried like where they're martyred. You know, that's why the shuhada, they're all like buried at the kind of plain of Uhud. But this is who Musab ibn Umair was. And when you learn the biographies of people, it's not so you're just learning stories of companions, but you want to know who you're reading so that you're reading their life into their actions and their words. You're not just turning their words into something else. Do you know? And that's with anybody. If you're reading about like Malcolm X, rahimahullah, if you're reading about Muhammad Ali, rahimahullah, if you're reading about prominent companions and prophets. You're reading hadith. The reason why we study the seerah is so that when we read the individual hadith, it inculcates love, but we're also understanding the person behind the words, right? This man who gave up everything for Islam, but also wasn't willing to give up Islam for anything, is like the other way to look at it. He's the one that the Prophet chooses to go teach people in Medina about Islam. Do you get what I mean? Like till the very end, he honors the standard bearer role. It's not about materialistic gain. He removes the shackles of the dunya that hold him down. And the Prophet tells these people about ethics and morals, and he sends somebody with them who lives bigger than himself to be the first emissary to teach them about Islam. He's now with them between year 11 and year 12 of the Hijrah, of Revelation, right? Before Hijrah, 11 and 12 of Revelation. Year 11, 12 people come. In year 12, about 75 people come now to take a second Pledge of Allegiance that we'll talk about next time, because it's got a little bit more things that they're committing to at this juncture. But in that year, Musab ibn Umair is talking to a lot of different people. And you have now both individual conversions. They say that there wasn't a tribe or a clan in Medina that didn't have at least one or two individuals or homes that were now Muslim. And in being able to understand how is it that it's spreading there and not having the experience that it was having in Mecca, where it was being deeply persecuted. Do you get what I mean? Something's got to be going on that in Medina, they're actually becoming Muslim. And in Mecca, they're trying to kill Muslims, right? What I'd like for you to do is turn to the person next to you so we can start talking a little bit more. What do you think made it different? Why was it in Medina that there was people becoming Muslim, and in Mecca, people were trying to stamp out Islam? And in what was achieved, quantifiably, the number of people who became Muslim in Medina in a shorter period of time is the equivalent of the number of Muslims you had pretty much in totality in Mecca up until that point. What are the things that we think are contributing to this? We can turn to the persons next to us and talk about it a little bit, and then we'll come back and discuss. Go ahead.
There's a book there.
Like for example, like if you really want here they're not. So I think it's about like they don't want the truth to
Okay, so what are some of the things that are coming up for people? What are we talking about? Why do we think like this happened in Medina, but it didn't happen in Mecca? Yeah.
I was saying maybe because if you look at the time of the Muslims in Mecca during that time period, Islam was still building, right? So the Muslims weren't very strong during that time, and oftentimes they were forced to not be very open with their practice, and they used to hide inside their houses, and they weren't like very loud with what they were doing. They used to like essentially practice in secret, right? So the call towards Tawheed and Islam wasn't as loud as it was when the Muslims entered the city of Medina. And in Mecca, the Muslims weren't as strong, and people, they don't like to join what looks like the losing team. They want to be on the team that looks like they're winning, the team that's more powerful, and the team that has more influence. Also because in Mecca, there was a very, they were very tribal and they were very traditional, and in Mecca, the idol worship was very prevalent there. Allah talked about this in the Quran when he says that you'll find when you call people towards Islam and Tawheed, you'll find them to say that they follow that which their forefathers did. Right, and this was a perfect example of the people in Mecca. They were called to Islam and they said, no, we'll follow our tradition. This has been around for thousands of years.
Yeah. Amazing. Mashallah. Other thoughts? What was going on that made Medina like more willing to listen to this message than Mecca? Yeah.
If I'm recalling correctly, I feel like last week we talked about like we mentioned that there was like Judaism in Yathrib, and it was just a very high bar of entry for them. But so I'm thinking like the message of monotheism existed, like people were aware, and so Islam wasn't as foreign for them to accept. Versus in Mecca, totally, you're telling them like your idol worship is completely wrong, so that's different than hearing something familiar.
Okay. Yeah. Any other thoughts? Yeah.
I don't know if this is like sure or not, but I heard that like basically the Meccan economy like thrived on like paganism. Like people were paying to go on Hajj to go see like a Kaaba filled with idols, and they weren't like going to give up that like economic power.
Yeah. All these things make a lot of sense, right? Why do we want to know this? Like, why is it relevant?
because it's something that still goes on today.
Yeah.
In what ways?
Okay, so the question you said, like, I came up with the idea or the thought of maybe because like Islam was spreading fast because it was the truth, and in Mecca they didn't want the truth to be everywhere. They didn't want everyone to know about the truth. Like the same goes as like Palestine, like what's going on in Palestine and why are they getting killed and we're not, say your question again.
I mean, what you're saying makes sense. Like, I was saying, why is it that in Medina, people were becoming Muslim and they were embracing Islam? They definitely weren't like fighting Islam, right? There were some people who got perturbed, but they weren't killing people, right? In Mecca, they were trying to like destroy Islam. Do you know? What's the difference here?
I think it's about the truth. They don't want the truth to be known. You know.
Because of what? Because you were saying something that was really important. Like, why do you think they don't want the truth to be known?
Because they will lose control. They won't be able to like control people. And when people know the truth, they will lose control.
Other thoughts? Like, what was going on in Medina that made it different from Mecca? The experience? Yeah.
You were also asking like why it's important maybe to think about this now, and like we were thinking about this too, that like I feel like there's always this question even in like modern day of like, can you hold multiple identities at once? Like, can you be American and Muslim? Can you be a woman and Muslim? And I think at the time there might have been this question of like, can you be Quraysh and Muslim? Can you hold both of these or multiple identities at the same time, and what does that mean? So I think understanding that is important so you can apply it to today.
Yeah. Thinking also now, what does it mean for me to share Islam with somebody that's not Muslim? And in what ways do I do this? And is that something that is a recommendation, a suggestion, an obligation? Does it vary from person to person, individual? When you live in anti-Black societies, an ideology of whiteness purposely removes your name and narrative from you. It makes you have to represent 2 billion Muslims all the time. And that can be overwhelming purposefully to make you in a place where you want to retreat from that. If you take away that motivation, does our religion tell us still that we have to be mindful of how it is that we represent religion to people? Because through our interactions, people will come to a place of determination about like what this religion means. Do you know? And not meant to be heavy or burdensome. The Prophet had to send somebody to Medina who was going to live the ethics that he just taught these people in this pledge at Al-Aqaba. Musab ibn Umair, he's going to not be somebody who, when they get on the ground, they're going to say, the Prophet told us not to do X, Y, or Z and to do X, Y, and Z, but you're not doing it, and you're also doing the opposite of what he's saying. No, like he's living like what these words are. Do you see what I'm saying? And in the strategy of sharing, if in fact there is something that talks about part of my practice of this is to yield to what it is, how am I sharing something that I just keep to myself? Do you get what I mean? And in this early part of it, like, why are they sharing this with people in Medina? Because is the goal for them to have a place where the people in Mecca are like just practicing and they can go and live safely? Or is it a both and they're trying to also get to a place where they share the teachings of this religion? And can a metric of me understanding the value of the religion be that I actually then want to share it with somebody if it really is something that I embrace in the way that it's intended to be embraced? Do you get what I'm saying? And the hesitations come in because there is parallels, right? It's hard to be Muslim right now. It's hard to be a lot of things. Like, look at what people are doing. They just detained another kid from Colombia. May Allah make it easy for him. Do you know what I mean? I think now 600 kids have been deported from colleges, right? And I haven't looked at that number in a few days, right?
Also, like, if you're from another country, they're also deporting your passport. Like, let's say you want to go to Umrah or something. Like, if you're like Sudan or Pakistan or any of these countries, they won't allow you inside the country.
Yeah. So the immigration bans are coming, but they're purposeful to create chilling effects, right? Isolation, individualism, like being on your own is not like a prophetic command. It's about being together. So you can lean on people, find more strength. So when you're by yourself, it's a lot more comforting to know that there's other people who get me, right? But you see the tactics that Shaitan implements that are rooted in these oppressive systems that get us now to be isolated, which is different from being marginalized, right? You can be marginalized and still exist with people, but to be isolated, completely separate. You see what I mean? And the numbers make a difference, right? The numbers create clout. And you get to a place where you start to confront individually, do I see my Islam as a liability or as an asset? Are there certain rooms that I frequent fully as a Muslim and certain places where I just forego any sense of Islam? And it's anecdotal. I can't say there's data behind it, but there's a lot of people who have said to me, like, this is where I do my Islam, but when it comes to business, like, business is business. It's like, no, man, like, business is where you should probably be the most Muslim. Do you know what I mean? Like, not the least Muslim, right? You're like getting your sustenance and your risk and you're selling and buying. There's all this accountability. People are going to have rights over you that they're going to stand on the day of judgment. And said that Muslim guy who like said he's Muslim was the one that was selling me like my beer and my alcohol. They're the one that cheated me on this deal and like created all kinds of unethical frames, right? You can't undermine that pretty much every time we've had somebody ask, what is Islam? The Najashi asked, what is Islam? The chieftains of these tribes that the Prophet's talking to on the Hajj, on year 10, year 11, year 12, what is Islam, right? All of these people, what is Islam? Do you know? And all the time, their responses from the Prophet or the companions are about things rooted in morality and ethics that are in contrast to what people were doing predominantly when Ja'far radiallahu an is like telling the Najashi about what they do. He said, this is what we believe, and this is why our people like persecute us. If you stand for something, you will inevitably get enemies. If you don't have enemies, it probably means you're not standing for something. Do you know? And so here, this is where courage and bravery comes in, but it's not an on-off switch. Like, courage is a product of the heart, and a state of the heart necessitates understanding Islam on a whole, dimensionally, and you won't get out of spiritual exercises what you can only get if you actually perform them. You won't get upliftment from being in a communal experience other than you make the time and effort to be in a community. The very first thing in the pledge says, don't associate partners with God. So if you struggle with something, it's hard to do. It's not a religion that you make God subservient to you. You are subservient to God. You can struggle with it. You can have difficulty with it. You don't want to make the haram halal or the halal haram. Then you're just making your own religion at that point, right? So what are they sharing? Not like watered down versions of this that are built in systems that make us say, I'm just going to be 50% of who it is that I am. And that's like good enough at this point. Yeah, it's difficult out there. But that's where like you read these things and say, these guys were going through hell too. And what was it that was a consistent variable? The iman in Allah and the last day. Something that was bigger than this world and something that was drawing them towards the living that wasn't just in terms of what is finite. Musab ibn Umair, he is shaheed. They're called the shuhada because they're bearing witness to what exactly? Everything that the message is teaching them, right? It's evidenced in like where he's at. Who would be a better representative of the messenger of God than this man, radiallahu an? Do you know? With Musab ibn Umair, the number of people that become Muslim in the time span of now when they leave with a group of 12, they come back with a group of 75 in year 12, and there's like in between things happening. There's hundreds of people in Medina that convert to Islam. And it's coming from a person who is willing to live their Islam and from people who are willing to share Islam, not like with tables and passing out pamphlets, but in a place through their character, their demeanor, their behavior. when Usayd and Sa'ad ibn Mu'adh go and speak to Mus'ab ibn Umair, Usayd goes ready to tell him to like stop teaching this thing. And then he comes back and the people say he wasn't the same person when he went to talk to Mus'ab ibn Umair as when he came back, because the embrace of the message changes you, right? Islam is supposed to transform you. It's supposed to influence the person that you are more than any other philosophy or ideology. And when Sa'ad ibn Mu'adh goes, right, this is a man who the hadith says, like the throne of God shook when Sa'ad ibn Mu'adh passed away. Do you know? The same thing. And Sa'ad ibn Mu'adh, these guys, they were leaders of their tribes. They all became Muslim. You had like now mass conversions happening outside of Mecca. Do you see what I mean? But it's coming from us understanding like some of these foundational principles. Some of them had to be willing to live bigger than themselves. They didn't see religion as a private affair. They saw it as something that you actually lived by in your day-to-day interactions. And then where you had opportunity, like you were well versed in what it actually was about. So how is Jafar radiallahu an? How is Mus'ab radiallahu an? How are they speaking about Islam without the Prophet being there? Well, they're actually like being taught it, and they're willing to take it as an educational experience. Do you know? Do you get what I mean? It starts to lay the foundation of what will become Medina. Next week, we'll talk about like the second oath that takes place at Al-Aqaba, some of the other elements that are introduced into it. We'll talk about kind of what are foundational things that are happening now on the other end of like Yathrib getting ready, right? But we're getting closer to the 13th year where the Meccan period stops and the Medinese starts to begin. So likely through the course of the next few weeks, we'll like talk about what the migration was like, assassination attempts on the Prophet of God, right? It's not a joke. Like they're trying to kill him and kill people. And they're still like living true to what it is that they're being taught. Do you know? That's where like that bravery theme has to be understood. Courage isn't exerted in the absence of fear. Courage is exerted when fear is present. Do you know? You take baby steps to get to a place where the heart makes you like bold and audacious sometimes, but not reckless. Courage is the middle path. Cowardliness and recklessness are the extremes. We're not meant to be a reckless like population. Like courage is not recklessness. Do you see? And they're going to go through still a bunch of things until they start this like movement, and people are going to move, and then the Prophet is going to move, and there'll be other individuals that we interact with, including on this understanding of like hanging out only with Muslims, because the man who's going to guide the Prophet through much of his like exit is going to be somebody who's not Muslim. And what does that mean as we extrapolate these things like from the Seerah? Okay, so let's do this. Isha is going to come in about like 10 minutes or so, give or take. So we want to take a pause and let people make wudu and kind of get ready, so we're not just kind of jumping from one thing to the next. Tomorrow we're going to have iftar, and Sheikh Fayaz, I think, has his halaqah tomorrow. At Jummah, we'll have lunch after the Jummah prayer. Next Friday, Sheikh Yahya Rodis is going to be giving the khutbah, and then Friday after Jummah, like in the couple hours after, he'll do like a class here. You guys should definitely plan to be here for that. Sheikh Yahya is amazing, mashallah. He's got one of the most like calming presences that I've ever seen like in a person. He's just very like still and serene individual, mashallah. So you want to make a note of that. This Saturday, we're hosting for a second time the Malika National Muslim Women's Summit. They have an amazing speaker lineup. The Village Auntie will be here. Dalia Mugahed will be here. Yasmin Al-Hadi will be here. Rana Abdul Hamid. and I didn't go because I'm not a woman, but it happened last year. I think there was like 500 or 700 people that came out, and we got really good feedback. It's not just like straight lectures and talks, but they do a bunch of different things programmatically that, you know, people received well. So definitely try to come out to that. They do have a ticket price, but there's scholarships available also. So if people know people who could benefit from it, we sent out some emails and it's on our Instagram as well. And I don't think there's anything else that's happening like this weekend, unless I'm wrong. Yeah. Does anybody know? Okay, so why don't we take a pause here? I'm looking at on there. Yeah, there's not anything else happening other than the summit. So let's take a pause. If people want to make wudu, we'll call the adhan in like about, I think 8:57 is when Isha comes in. So people have like 10 minutes just to kind of be in community with each other. Use the time to like talk to people and make wudu. We'll call the adhan, give people some time to pray their sunnahs, and then we'll call the iqama a little bit after 9 o'clock, inshallah. Yeah. Okay. Assalamu alaikum. See you next week.